This is Warhammer 40k Space Wolf on Xbox Series X, taking a look at the single-player turn-based experience. So this video is sponsored by HeroCraft, the publisher of the game, so that I was able to bring you a review here. So what you get here, again, as mentioned, a single-player experience with a few different options. There's a campaign split across a few different acts, with each act containing a number of chapters that takes place in a somewhat different area of the Warhammer 40k type universe. There's also a challenges mode where you can kind of go in and do a few extra little challenge slices from the overall campaign. And then there's a crafting card type scenario as well that we'll dive into. So what we're getting here, and this is what I was told, a 4K resolution at 60 FPS. So it does actually kind of look decent and also play fairly smoothly in that regard. Now, with that, obviously there are visual issues with the game that I noted on a couple different levels. It seems like anything to do with fire has this weird sort of texture missing kind of effect to it, which I thought was really odd. I didn't think it was necessarily detrimental to the experience, but it definitely was something that kept popping up in different levels, so hopefully that is patched in the near future. Other than that, everything ran fine and smooth. It was just like this weird visual sort of artifacting, texture missing kind of look. That's what I kind of got the gist of it, and I think you're sort of seeing that. Other than that, you know, visually, when it comes to the environment, it's not necessarily like the most fancy of things, you know, in regards to the tree and stuff, but that's really not hugely important. I think it looks realistic enough in terms of capturing the feeling and the style of the 40k universe. And then on top of that, I have to give them props for the detail on the different characters. You know, the space marines and the different creatures and stuff, I think look really, really good, especially in these zoomed up scenarios where you sometimes get an almost Sniper Elite-esque sort of execution type thing through the skull. It looks wild. So with that, like I mentioned, you get a selection of different ways to play the game. Challenge mode, you can kind of do a little bit of an endless type scenario, so that's an okay thing. You can kind of go in there and you get your extra time. But the meat of this is the single player, and you got to remember this is more of a small tier type budget experience. If you like turn-based gameplay, you'll probably enjoy what this is. I'd actually compare it a little bit towards XCOM in terms of some of it being a little bit difficult. It does actually, you know, kind of challenge you a fair bit, and there's not really difficulty options for you to move through or choose between. You just get the standard gameplay experience, and you have to deal with it, and the AI sure loves to attack your leader, because if you get your leader killed, you have to restart, which can be quite annoying. Like I said, you know, like kind of playing like 20 minutes, 30 minutes for, you know, say a level or something like that, and your leader dies, and it's like, oh, and you have to restart from the beginning. It's a little tiring in that regard. And turn-based isn't necessarily my favorite genre, but, you know, playing it is kind of fun, and it is, you know, sort of gnarly. Just in terms of, like, the combat and the weapons, you get a wide range of different tools, and this is where the card system comes into play. So the game has this kind of default system where you're playing, and I'm sure you've been seeing that, and you have cards that you're using per turn. You have so many action points, and there's sort of this, you know, real-time list that kind of goes over where everybody gets their turns, the different characters, whether it's the enemies or you, and you got to be smart about your actions and what you're doing, because you get, like, you know, basically 2 a turn almost, and you got to be like, okay, am I shooting? Am I doing something more defensively? Am I trying to heal? Am I trying to use a special action card? And then, as I was mentioning, you got this area in the menu where you're basically kind of spending these points to either get like a pack of cards to maybe get something different, or crafting, say, a rare card, or crafting a normal card, and seeing what kind of things you can get, like different weapons, different, you know, tools, different advantages that you can just take into the campaign to kind of, you know, battle with. So I think there's actually like a decent level of replayability, although you may feel a bit of a grind, I guess you could say, if some of the levels are a little bit challenging to you. And you do unlock, you know, again, the additional acts. You actually have to work through chapter by chapter by chapter. So there's actually quite a bit of gameplay to this. And like I said, they did take the time to actually sit there and craft something that has a lot of elements from the 40k universe. You know, you get a range of different enemies and, you know, combative troops that you get to fight against throughout the course of the adventure, which is kind of interesting. I also wanted to mention that with the grid-type play, as you kind of move your characters around, it can be really tiring to kind of line it up properly, because your character looks one way and they can't shoot this way, or sometimes you feel like you should be able to shoot one way and you can't shoot that way in regards to like some of the blocks around you, as in a character on the other side of something being just out of the range of your gun, even though they're like literally right beside you. And it seems like the AI is really good at kind of positioning themselves well to attack you, and then you're sitting there just being frustrated because your character can't necessarily aim on them in that particular situation. Just, it takes a little bit of extra balancing and setup on your part in order to make sure that works, which again can be a little tiring to deal with. There's not really much of a story or any story. Like, I don't know really how to describe this. So it's the Space Wolves, and you join in the battle against the Wicked Servants of Chaos and the Sinister Necrons. But you're given like little text blurbs before levels or during levels, so it was kind of a little hard to follow. Like you're basically just doing like miscellaneous story things. There's no real I guess you could say comprehensive or even really necessarily cohesive story. Like, I mean, there's kind of one going on, but it's not like this is the situation of the universe, you're down here battling and you understand exactly who these people are, you're kind of thrown into it. So I think they maybe expect you to have a understanding of the Warhammer universe story-wise. I think you could come in and just kind of be like, hey, these are just turn-based missions you're doing, and have fun that way. But I was also kind of hoping for something story-wise with a little bit more meat on the bone. So, you know, again, props for the quantity of different characters that you fight, you know, the variety there. And for the variety of different levels, the missions are different. You know, you got things such as like protecting stuff, or capturing something, or taking someone out. Different ways of enemies, you know, decently sized environments that you're fighting in. You know, it has actually, again, for a budget option, a decent amount of content to it. Initially I was like, oh, it doesn't seem like there's a whole lot, and then I kept going. I was like, okay, you could play quite a bit of this and have a time working at it. It's got a clean UI. I like the card system. Like, it's kind of bridging together two things I really am not huge on in gaming, and that's turn-based gameplay and card-based gameplay, which is, you know, kind of funny here, because I was like, oh, this is actually decently solid in how this is handled. Because it's like I said, it's not necessarily something I would typically check out, and I found this kind of cool. Now, that being said, I do, you know, kind of going on that again, I do like the Warhammer 40k universe. I always find the different games that are licensed out for that to be kind of enticing, because it's sort of fun seeing what all these different companies do with the license. You get such a variety of different titles. You get like intense first-person shooters and cooperative adventures or turn-based games. You never know what you're gonna get. It's just wild. Sometimes there's like dungeon crawling, or I was thinking like ARPGs or something like that. But you know, it's such a variety. So it's kind of cool to see something different and see the different characters. And then, you know, on top of the cards, a little bit of like group team management, I guess you could say, in the menus. I wish it was a little bit cleaner in regards to working through the story. Like, you finish a level, and then you're kicked back to the main menu, which really doesn't make sense, unless it's trying to get you to go do the card stuff, but it doesn't really, like, it doesn't explain any of this stuff to you. You're just kind of expected to fiddle around and play with things. Like, I could think some people, if you don't bother taking any time looking through the menus, you might not even know that the game has like an advancement card system to it, and you'll just be like, I don't know. And you know, I could see some people just totally ignoring that, whereas you know, because I was doing this more in depth, or trying to do a fairly comprehensive review thing on this one, I was like, let's look at the different options here. And I was like, oh, there's a whole card building system. It was actually one of the first things I noticed. I was like, oh, a card building system, that's weird. And then as you play the game, you're like, oh, okay, that makes sense. But yeah, not really much of a tutorial. Like, you get like a little bit of one that kind of tells you what you're doing, but you know, they almost just drop you in and they're like, good luck. So I think some polishing, you know, obviously with the weird fire issue, because honestly, like, everything else ran really fine in this. I didn't come across any problems, but you know, it just kind of looks a little shoddy seeing the fire like that, so this should be an easy patch for them, honestly. And then from there, you know, other stuff, it looks fine. The environment's decent. It's nothing too spectacular, but it's fine. But it really shines when it comes to the character models, and I hope you're seeing that with like the zoom-ins and stuff. Like the characters look really great, and it's a little bit gory, a little bit bloody. You get a range of different abilities. The cards are very clean. The concept of you know, equipping weapons and tools are kind of nice and well done. They put together a fairly solid and actually surprisingly decent offering if you like turn-based gameplay. So I think that's kind of cool. Oh, and also HDR support. I missed that one as well earlier on. But normally people are more interested in frame rate and resolution. But I hope you enjoyed this look. And it is sponsored by HeroCraft, and again, available in the stores.